Good evening and welcome to the 2016 Minnesota State Representative District 55A Candidates Forum being held at the Shakopee campus of River Valley Church. Tonight's debate is being sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Brookwood Community Church and a member of the Chamber, and I'll be serving as tonight's moderator. Our candidates for representative are Ms. Mary Hernandez and Representative Bob Lunan. Would you welcome them, please, this evening? Our candidates are standing in alphabetical order by last name. They'll have an opportunity to make a 2-minute opening statement, after which I'll ask each of the candidate questions. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond. In some cases, their opponents will be given 30 seconds to make rebuttal comments. And as moderator, I have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions. And if I do, candidates will have 30 seconds for their follow-up answers. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make those opening statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce for hosting tonight and making this event possible. Also, this is my home church, so I'd like to thank River Valley for hosting the event. Thank you, Rob, for being our moderator tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I have lived in Shakopee for around 20 years. I have 4 kids that are born, 4 beautiful kids. 3 of them have been born and raised here in Shakopee. I've been married to my wonderful husband for around 18 years, and we keep going. I also am a co-founder of the Shakopee Diversity Alliance, and what that does, or what this organization, one of the focuses is to unite, to use the strength of our diversity, and I believe in a stronger together mentality. I'm also the co-founder of Esperanza, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on our youth. I call it recycling our kids because it teaches them to give back to our community, to be leadership. It also has around 35 local partnerships with here within Shakopee. So thank you very much. I am actually very proud to call Shakopee my community and my home.
Mr. Lunan, 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Yes, thank you. And I also want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity. And for those of you that took the time out of your lives to come this evening, I'm a 34-year resident of Shakopee, which to a segment of people makes me still new. I came here because I had an opportunity to work with youth. I'm an insurance agent. I've owned an agency in town here all of those years. I, too, have raised my family here. I have 4 children as well that are all up and about. One of them has come back to the community and teaches at Saks Junior High. I've got several kids that coach now as well. And I had to step away from it once I got elected to the legislature. I'm the sitting representative from Shakopee. And I've learned a lot in those first 2 years, not so much about subject matter, because I've been fortunate enough to be in situations where I was able to do a lot of research. And you do anything a lot, you get better at it. But what I've gotten to see is the legislative process. And I do have to say how struck I was at how nonpartisan my experience in the House of Representatives was. You had sincere people, even though we were very different, which makes it a wonderful fabric, but very, very sincere and so easy to respect, and we would come up with solutions to some of the problems. The leadership that we had up in the legislature, both DFL and GOP, came forward right at the outset and said, let's at least do what we agree on. And so many times in politics that doesn't happen because there's so much posturing that goes on. I'm proud to have been a part of that. I'm proud to be part of a lot of the things that we got done and eager to get back to work on some of the things that we did not accomplish.
Well, candidates, our first question this evening is, what is your vision for our state? And Representative Lunan will begin with you for this question.
Well, I have a vision for Minnesota, for any home in America where there's an opportunity. The Constitution says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It does not say happiness. And that we give an opportunity to people to go out and do the work themselves. I think governments spent too much resources trying to solve natural consequences people incur from bad decisions that they make. And I think in the long run, that just makes things worse and worse. I've been a long-time track coach. I've coached a lot of people in town. I've coached a lot of their children. I have never figured out a way I could make a kid faster by giving them crutches. It's effort and it's work. And we go back to instilling that in our school, and that will come back through and solve some of our education problems. It will solve some of our employment problems, minimum wage, because you'll have a higher skilled workforce.
Ms. Hernandez, what is your vision for the state?
Well, if you know me, I worked for the Shakopee Public Schools for the past 13 years. My vision is to foster educated, skilled workers, employees, students. We have a lack of funding. Shakopee did not qualify for preschool funding. If we are not investing where we need to, how can we produce qualified? I get the pursuit of happiness, but not everybody knows that. There's a lot of new immigrants in our community. We need to be able to give them the resources, the tools, the education for them to succeed and contribute to our city, our state, and our country.
Representative Lunan, 30 seconds to follow
Thank
up.
you. I'd like to respond to that. I actually agree that there are more effective places we could be spending some of our money. I think we do that by reallocating away from things that aren't working. I think a great exercise for a school district is to go through and prioritize based on the number one priority, are we teaching children to learn, and from most effective to least effective. And then when it's time to reallocate, to start from the bottom and come up. I think we have all the money required to solve the problem. We just got to make sure we're putting the dime in the right slot.
Ms. Hernandez, 30 seconds to respond.
Sorry, thank you. I would disagree. I do not believe that we have the right funding to help our educators succeed. How do we expect them to do and prioritize when principals are buying their own pens? I worked for the Shakopee schools. It's a struggle.
Well, Ms. Hernandez, could you give an example of how you would work across party lines if you were elected?
As the founder of Esperanza, and like I said, I have found in Shakopee that there's major collaboration. We've been able to bridge from religion with the school and with the hospital. I'm currently a board member in the St. Francis Hospital, and we need collaboration. We need to sit down, we need to talk, and one party cannot do this alone.
Representative Lunan, could you give an example of a way in the past 2 years that you have reached across party lines?
When I first got elected, one of my priorities was to integrate into the political process the different communities we have here in Shakopee. One of the first people that I sought out is standing right there, and she'll agree with you, correct?
Yes.
And I go find where the leaders are and bring them involved, and I understand how important communication is. In the House, not only am I reaching across party lines or across the aisle, if you will, I don't know if there is an aisle, but after the first year, there was a special election where one of the Democrat seats was flipped over to Republican. They gave that new representative my seat on the floor. And the reason they did that is they asked me to move over to the DFL side with some of the other Republicans because it was obvious to them the relationship that I had already set up by taking the initiative, visiting with them, sitting down with them, and listening.
Well, candidates, would you care to follow up?
I would like to rebuttal because as I looked at Representative Lunan's voting, he voted GOP more than our Speaker of the House. He voted with the party all the time. So I don't know where the compromise and collaboration came.
Representative Lunan, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure what a GOP vote is. What happens is you formulate the best possible option, you contrive the best possible bill that includes both DFL and GOP ideas, if you will, and those are labels, and then you go through and you vote on them. Now, the contention that I voted GOP primarily would be the fact that I guess we're in the majority, and I did that, but those bills all had components from all kinds of members in the House.
Well, candidates, our next question may actually... You took a you'll have another opportunity to follow up. Each of you get one per question. Okay. And this question may actually be longer than your responses, although once we raise the topic, I think you actually may want to go on a while. According to their own website, the Metropolitan Council is the regional policy-making body, planning agency, and provider of essential services for the Twin Cities metropolitan region. The council's mission is to foster efficient and economic growth for a prosperous region. That's according to their website. However, this body is largely appointed by the governor and is not responsible to or accountable to the towns, the cities, and the counties that make up the Twin Cities, including Scott County and Shakopee. What do you think should happen to the Met Council, And how do you think we should go about making that happen? Representative Lunan, will begin with you.
The Met Council should sell all its furniture on Craigslist. Just get rid of it. It's not largely appointed by the governor, it's appointed by the governor. It does social engineering. There is no accountability. There's a bunch of stuff that comes out of that entity that if the public was in a situation where they would know some of these priorities that are in there, they would have a fit. The first chance I get at boarding and nailing the place up, I'm going to take it because it doesn't belong there. We've got all the entities, the ideas in government that we need. All it is another layer, another contriving of social engineering, and it's just incredibly ineffective.
Ms. Hernandez, what do you think should happen to the Met Council, and how would you go about making that happen?
You know, and I keep referring to my personal experience with Esperanza. It has taken a lot of partners to get our youth involved. The gang activity has decreased humongously in the district, in the school district, because of our programs. So I would not erase anybody off the map. It's how do we collaborate? How do we make our city better? How do we bring the bright minds? As far as being governed by the governor is, I think obviously there's always room to work and improve. It's what helps our city. I think what helps our constituents. We're not lose focus of what isn't working. It's how do we make it work, and that I believe that's collaborating and sitting down and talking.
The Representative Lunan,
Right there's an example of big government thinking, and rather than going through and saying, is it working or not, we need to come up with a way to make it work. And it's like MNsure in healthcare. It's not working, it's just a disaster. And we put so much resource into trying to keep it around, just like the Met Council. Let's just call it what it is. You cannot teach a cat to bark. Deal with it and get rid of it.
And then I go, here we are, and this is why we haven't been able to fix our roads, fix our healthcare, fix our education, because we have the mentality of everybody barks and not everybody barks. It's how do we work together to help our city succeed?
Thank you, candidates. The legislature has not passed a transportation spending bill. What is going to be the impact of the lack of a transportation spending bill, and what should our state do? Ms. Hernandez, we'll begin with you.
That would be the magic formula. One of them is rushing all these bills and all this behind closed negotiation. We need better transparency. Our roads are still crumbling. Our bridges are still collapsing. There's lack of funding. There's a $21 billion deficit. If we can't agree, we can't sit down and we can't have conversations as legislators, where are we going to fund this from?
Representative Lunan, what's going to be the impact of the lack of a transportation spending bill, and what should we do about it?
Well, what we did is we left Turn on the Lights transportation bill passed. We actually put together, formulated a transportation bill, which also had bonding components in it, that passed the vast majority of the legislature, both DFL and Republican again. And with 8 minutes left in the session, a senator up in St. Louis Park decided to tack on a bill to fund light rail. Now, let me walk you through light rail. If we're going to ease congestion, if we're going to maintain roads or even build a new road, it's $1 million a mile. That's a lot. To build light rail takes $119 million a mile out of our transportation budget. If the foundation, the crumbling bridges and roads are the case, if the foundation of your home was deteriorating, why would you put an escalator in?
Can I answer?
Ms.
Okay.
Hernandez, 30 seconds to rebut.
There's a certain allocated money that specifically is for the light rail. You can't use that money for roads and bridges. So whether your basement is crumbling, you can't fix the basement because you can't touch that money.
That's not true.
All right.
And that's your opinion.
Candidates, if you would now please describe what you see, speaking of light rail, as the right balance between cars, buses, light rail, in moving people around. Representative Lunan, will begin with you. The right balance.
There isn't a balance. What happens is what we do in government now is we go out and we create or we fund a solution, and then we walk around and look for a problem. And we're seeing this in our experiments in public transit. Now, I'm an advocate for bus transit because a bus is, you can take people to where they want to go. A transit station, and we're going through the pain of this in Shakopee, a transit station is where you get on a bus. You get off the bus wherever you're going. And the Minnesota Valley Transit needs to recognize that. We've got some new leadership now, and I hope it goes in that direction. But that we address some of that. As far as the increased roads and cars capacity, we're always going to have automobiles. There's always going to be an appetite for that. I think how you increase bus or transit ridership is identify with people, okay, what are the problems? What's the barrier keeping you from it? And then let's just solve that specific problem rather than just put more buses or light rail out there.
Ms. Hernandez, what is the right balance between cars, buses, and light rail and moving people around?
It's a blessing of living in the suburbs. Everybody has a car, but not everybody can. Ms. Brecky mentioned if you're graduating from college, if you're graduating from high school, how do you move? How do you afford it? There needs to be a balance with light rail. There needs to be a balance with our transit. There is, I'm a big advocate for education. We cannot get our high school students to Normandale. We cannot get our high school students to Hennepin Tech. There needs to be a balance.
Candidates, should the state give preference in awarding contracts based on criteria like race or ethnicity? Why or why not? Ms. Hernandez, we'll begin with you.
Would you repeat the question?
Should the state give preference in awarding contracts based on criteria like race or ethnicity? Why or why not?
I'm not, why? Why would they? I get it, we're brown, and some of them are different, but we're all working here. There is a difference between getting access to the resources, to education. If we want contributing citizens, we have to be able to educate them and teach them the U.S. system. It takes a little. That's why it's not everybody has that pursuit of happiness or access to that pursuit of happiness. So I don't know if it's additional funding, but it's using it in the right positions, the right situations.
Representative Lunan, do you think that the state should give preference in awarding contracts based on any criteria?
No. You bring in the best. That's what brings down cost. That's what increases quality. I've had people I've talked to as a coach, people I've talked to as a business person, people I've now talked to as a legislator that come from minority groups that are reticent to get involved in some of the bidding processes because they're concerned with being tagged with a label. We bring in the best. Some of those best don't look like me. Some of those very best people have a different gender than I do. And I invite them up to the table and come in. There's plenty of room and there's plenty of appetite for it. But to go through and force it, what it does is it diminishes the effectiveness of what we're doing. And that's what government kind of looks like right now. When we go up to the Capitol, nobody asks what color is. When we're going through in that room and we're deciding, it's the ideas that we come in, which has to do with the backgrounds you come from, the culture you come from, and everyone should be proud of who they are. But who I am should not be a factor or something that you have to deal with.
I find that interesting. Sorry, I find that interesting. If only there's 6 people of color at the Capitol. How can you balance how people look different? How do you choose what's the best if we're not fostering within our city? Again, this is where we go back to education and teaching them the right skills and the right tools. How do you decide who's the bestest?
We've got 134 members of the House of Representatives. Only 9 of us are way overweight. We are underrepresented. At what point do you stop going by that criteria? You are not what you look like. You are what you do. Let's just get to that. That's what I love about athletics. That's what I love about co-curricular activities is there's this little thing. The equity is the scoreboard. We go to 0-0 and boom, and you score on me, you get a point. I score on you, I get a point. And that's how it works. And the jersey color doesn't matter. The shoes you're wearing doesn't matter. The skin color doesn't matter.
Funny, I see a lot of Vikings fans that would disagree with you. It does matter. Color matters. Background matters. No? There's a difference between soccer and there's a difference between football. Soccer is big for Latinos. I mean, you have to take the background in account. How do you not?
Mr. Lunan, did you want to respond?
Yeah, this is a disservice we do to students. When I first got elected, I had some leaders in the Latino community come into my office, my insurance agency office. And what they talked to me about was their frustration when they send their children through the door of a public school and a well-intended adult goes to them, well, you're Latino, you only have to do this, or you're Latino, we're going to make it easier for you. And the habits that teaches their children and their frustration and how that's a different message than they're getting at the dinner table.
Candidates, the
Can I
state,
rebuttal on that or no?
we've already been 2 rounds on that.
Okay.
We'll have it, it'll come up again, I'm sure.
All right.
The state government reported recently that tax revenues for the current fiscal year have fallen already below projections. Why do you think that is happening? What's going to be the impact of this news, and what needs to be done about it? Representative Lunan, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think we went through a period of time recently, where production was dialed way up because inventory was down after coming off the recession. The reduction in revenue is obviously something to keep an eye on, but from a budgetary standpoint, we're sitting on a $900 million budget. Let me walk you through that. We are collecting $900 million from you. We don't even have a place to spend it. Now we have a solution, now we got to go find a problem to spend it on. And those people came up to the Capitol and had a lot of creative things they wanted that money spent on. But when you tax for the sake of taxing, we're going to make you pay a tax simply because you can, rather than this is the problem we want to solve, now bring the revenue into it. That's the way it should be done. That's how budgeting should be done in government. And right now, it's not.
When you talk about those people, you meant the DFLers?
For what?
For those people come and want to tax. I believe we need to invest in our education. How can we be sitting on $900 million and not fund our preschools? How do we not fund our roads? How do we need to be creative? Our budget, our gas taxes are not producing enough as high efficiency cars are coming more and more. What is the solution?
Ms. Hernandez, I'm actually going to give you 30 seconds more because this was your opportunity also to respond to the question, and that is, why do you think there is a shortfall in revenue, and what's going to be the impact of that news, and what needs to be done about the shortfall in revenue this year?
I don't think there's a formula yet. Our legislatures are still trying to figure that one out.
The problem won't come from that building. The problem will come from productivity in the workforce, which has to do with like what Mary said, education. And the component we need to dial up on education is not spending, it's consequences. The natural consequences that will not be broke because they cannot be broke. When you work harder, you tend to do better. When you don't work harder, you tend to do poorer. That relationship has never been foregone. We don't have a can't problem. The biggest problem we have in education is a won't problem. That's what we got to turn the gun on.
Ms. Hernandez, did you want to respond? 30 seconds.
Definitely. If you're not investing in our kids, how will they be good workers? How are they going to contribute to our city? How are they going to be high-skilled employees? We have our larger employers here struggling because we don't have the skills. Where are we thinking of coming up with this money?
Candidates, pivoting now to Shakopee and to our community. Recently, a daycare in Shakopee was vandalized. What do you think was the motivation for this act, and what do you think that the community's response to this act says about our community? Ms. Hernandez, we'll begin with you.
That would be an interesting question. I was there. We were peeling the paint. We were pulling the carpets. We had our wonderful Senator Eric Pratt that came to help and was tearing those carpets like a teenager. I don't know what the reason behind was, but I can tell you what the outcome was a united community coming together to service and help our children. There were over 160 kids that were affected by this action.
Representative Lunan, what do you think was the motivation for the act, and what do you think the community's response says about our community?
Well, I would leave what the motivation was to the police. That's under investigation. I actually went and met with the police chief on this and asked him, he brought up the term hate crime, which, by the way, I detest the concept of hate crime. The fact that some person's color makes the crime worse or less significant. But that was not a hate crime. But you know what? Whoever the knucklehead that did that, I hope they catch him, and I hope that he bears down or she bears down the consequences that should be going through. No one can call that right, and I feel, and I'm an insurance agent, I deal with these situations a lot, where somebody does something stupid and it ends up costing somebody else money. So I see this time in and time out again. It's my understanding they had insurance, and so it should get remedied, but there's still an emotional stain that stays there, that it's like pounding a nail in a board. You can pull the nail out, but that hole is still there, and it rattles people, especially the children, and I think that's a big regret.
Thank you.
I find that interesting because I know we invited him personally and he did not show up. I know you were babysitting, I get that, but I feel like something needs to be done. Everybody is so afraid to get away from it's a hate crime. I know we didn't want to call it that, and I'm not saying it was, but the owner doesn't feel safe. Their children doesn't feel safe. I refuse to believe that's the Shakopee we live in.
All right, I'm just going to
Representative Lunan.
point to where the bear did it in the buckwheat. When she contacted me and I thought there was work to be done and I could come and help, I was ready to go. Now, I had a conflict with a 2-month-old granddaughter, but when all of a sudden I get a correspondence that says, well, we're moving the start date because the governor wants to come down and speak, well, this is just a political event. And politicizing something as ridiculous and traumatic as a vandalism that involves children, yeah, I'm not going to come running to that.
Well, candidates, could we pivot to workplace and to the minimum wage now? What do you think the state's minimum wage should be and why? Representative Lunan, we'll begin with you.
I think a business should set what their wages should be based on what the job can pay for the business. Businesses have the right to pay their bills. And setting in a minimum wage actually goes back to the problem in school where you could have kids that have the won't problem, that won't do their work. And now it's like, well, you don't have to learn what they call soft skills, by the way, which means work starts at 8, you have to be there by 8. They don't learn that. We have a segment of our society that doesn't have the self-discipline to get to a job on time. And that starts back in the culture in our education. But minimum or a guaranteed living wage, a lot of those jobs are move-through jobs. You have so many hiring signs in town right now. This is an opportunity where employees can demonstrate a skill set and bump back up to well over a $15 minimum wage that the different people in the state are contending we need to have right now.
Ms. Hernandez, what do you think the state's minimum wage should be and why?
I don't think there's truly a magic number or what it should be. I understand that our small businesses take a big toll if you do the minimum, the $15 that we're asking for. I also understand that they're not able to afford, if you have, like Mr. Lunan, a three staff business. It's hard to determine what that cost should be. But again, I applaud the Shakopee School District because they have the CAPS program, which is teaching those skills for Canterbury Park, for Mystic Lake, for Valley Fair, to be able to, once they leave the high school, take those jobs and fill those positions people aren't able to do it because we're not investing in education.
Well, recently the Minnesota Nurses Association was on an extended strike against Allina Healthcare. What do you think about that strike and the deal that the nurses have tentatively reached with Allina? At least it was tentative at the beginning of this evening. Ms. Hernandez, will begin with you.
I sit on the St. Francis board, which is partly owned by Allina. I'm sorry that nurses have been on strike. I know that our St. Francis Hospital has been sending nurses out to Abbott Hospital. I hope that they reach an agreement sooner than later because it is affecting. The nurses do put the care in healthcare.
Representative Lunan, what do you think about the strike and the deal that the nurses had tentatively reached with Allina?
Well, I don't necessarily see what role government has in this. This is a contract being settled between two bargaining groups. The nurses union certainly is within their power to strike and try to evoke a better deal for them. One of the factors that comes into play from the federal level is on the health care contracts that they negotiate, we've got this little thing coming down the road called the Cadillac tax on health insurance, that if you have too good of health care, you end up having to pay a penalty to the government for that. That's going to be a problem for some of these unions that have done a good job of negotiating benefits at the offset of potentially reduced income. But that situation there, again, that's not a political. Those two groups should be working that out. And nurses are a big deal, and and everyone knows it. And I hope they all know everyone knows that. And that kind of puts the medical providers in kind of the 8-ball seat. But again, you have to be able to pay your bills.
In this election, the issue of pro-choice and pro-life has been raised in several different forms. Are you pro-choice or pro-life, and how does your position on balancing the life of the unborn with a woman's reproductive rights influence specific decisions that you would face as a legislator? Representative Lunan, will begin with you.
I'm pro-life. I see so many situations, and it seems, and I got to have it wrong, but it just seems like more than ever before, couples that are just dying to have a wee one and would love to adopt or have some of these situations. And we have these resources for these children. We have families for these children. The people that these babies that aren't given a chance are looking for them. And the abortion thing is beyond, and I don't think anybody calls an abortion good. I've never met that person yet. I don't know if everybody does that. And it is a tricky thing because it is a woman's body. I think we need to put energy and create a culture where a woman doesn't feel like she has to get an abortion. I think that's where the energy should be put on, rather than the we-they situation that is dropped into politically.
Ms. Hernandez, are you pro-life or pro-choice, and how would your position influence specific decisions that you would face as a legislator?
I am pro-choice. I have 2 daughters, and I want them to be able to have a choice of what they do with their body and not a man dictating what they do. I have also worked for the Shakopee Public Schools, like I've mentioned hundreds of times. I worked the last 3 years, I was based out of the high school. I dealt with our teenagers. Latinos have a high pregnancy rate at teenage years. There's not enough education. There needs to be more than that. There's not, that students don't know their resources and they still end up making their choice.
Residents of the Twin Cities have been accused of attempting to join foreign terrorist organizations. There was even a knife attack in St. Cloud that appears to have been at least inspired by extremist ideology. What should we do about members of our community with extremist ideology? Ms. Hernandez, will begin with you.
I think it hasn't been really identified as terrorist attack, if I understood correctly. I haven't seen that situation in Shakopee, and I'm a founder of Esperanza. We work with youth for leadership skills, to be examples, where we work with Valley Fair, we work with Canterbury Park, and I have not seen that here. If anything, our gang activity has decreased. So, and we work very close with our Somali community.
Representative Lunan, what should we do about members of our community with extremist ideologies?
Well, I think you're going to get rid of a weed, you kill it at the root. And the root of it is that all human beings, we're kind of a pack animal. We like to belong to experiences. We like following a sports team. We're willing to build our houses all right next to each other, even though there's certain compromise that has to go with that, but we want to be around each other. We like going to movies. And these young people, I think there's a self-esteem that comes with self-discipline, control over yourself, that is kind of liberating and freeing. And I suspect that we've got certain individuals that are so frustrated with their existence. And by the way, that frustration is real. They're contriving it. It's real. And that we should be taking a look at what can we help these people, how they see themselves, that they don't feel like they need to go belong to some nefarious cause like that, how they see themselves is differently.
Would this question also apply to students that carry the Confederate flag? Would that also be considered as a terrorist?
Extremist ideology. Answer it as you choose.
Because that we do see in Shakopee, and that's what sometimes makes students feel unsafe, or communities feel unsafe. But I don't feel it has been considered extremist.
The American Academy of Pediatrics is among several medical groups calling for extending paid parental leave to at least 12 weeks, if not more. What do you think that we should do about paid parental leave here in Minnesota? Representative Lunan, will begin with you.
Again, I believe that the government doesn't belong in that. That's the relationship between the employer and the employee. In my business, the benefits that I offer my employees exceed any mandate, but I do that because that's how I, as an employer, build affinity. That's part of my package of what I offer. All of a sudden, you go through and you mandate it, that's gone. That's completely gone. And there are businesses that could swing this, that it would not be a problem for. There are families that this would be a big deal for. Those families, whatever situation they're on their continuum of child rearing, should look at that, and it should be one of the factors in where they want to work at. And let the employers decide what employees they want and offer that package. That's where that decision belongs. Government is not the first stop for everything. In fact, it's not the first stop for almost anything. And this would be another example. Government doesn't belong in this.
Ms. Hernandez, what do you think we should do about paid parental leave here in Minnesota?
I think it should be extended. We have families that need to be at home with their kids, and if they're born with an illness, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, who determines what is the right time to be with that child once you've had it? So I'm concerned because you need to be with your family, you need to take care of them, and it needs to be paid. I get it, he's talking as a small business owner, but not everybody can afford it. Not everybody can. So I do feel that it becomes a government issue.
Representative Lunan, 30 seconds
Here's
to
a
respond.
reality check. When the government comes in and mandates this benefit and administrates the benefit, there's going to be a government take out of the dollar. You have to raise people's taxes. When you raise people's taxes, you put more employment pressure on that young family because of what they pay in sales tax, what they pay in all of these taxes that are funding some of our current health care, what we pay in property tax. When we talk about subsidized housing, which I'm assuming we're going to get to shortly, when we do all that, that comes back around. There is no such thing as free. Someone's going to pay.
Thank you. Candidates, where are there achievement gaps among Minnesota students, and what should we do about these achievement gaps? Ms. Hernandez, we'll begin with you.
Our highest achievement gap is of students of color. We have the largest achievement gap in the nation. What should we do? I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like a broken record. We need to fund education. We need to implement programs. We need to better train our educators. That is the impact. We're not going to close it thinking that there's a magic formula. Without funding as early as childhood or daycare, or even with paid leave.
Representative Lunan, where are there achievement gaps among Minnesota students, and what should we do about those achievement gaps?
Okay, well, I'm going to respectfully correct Mary. When I was on the school board and we had the building principals come in and do reports on production, and everyone loves telling everybody what color everybody is and how much their parents make and all of that, and there's a relationship to it. So then I asked the question, how many of these kids that aren't passing their standardized tests, that aren't getting it done, aren't even turning in their homework? Well, here's your disparity right here. We have an incredible disparity between success in kids that turn in their homework, do their work, and kids that don't. 88% of the children that aren't passing our standardized tests don't even turn in their homework. Now, turning in your homework has nothing to do with color. It has nothing to do with demographics, how many parents you have, who your parents love, or whatever. I come from a town of 199 people, and all 199 people where I come from just call that lazy. And that goes back to the discipline thing, where we've got a won't problem, and how we solve that won't problem, and some of it's going to be consequences, frankly.
Ms. Hernandez,
Rebuttal?
rebuttal?
He said on the school board, I work directly with our students. We have students, we had a couple of students that came from, I believe they were Nigeria. They were struggling with post-traumatic stress, and we wanted them to pass the standardized testing, and then they fall under the category of the achievement gap. It's not that they're not turning in their homework, it's they don't know the U.S. system. It's not that they're lazy, it's that our educators don't have the tools to handle this kind of situations.
Representative Lunan, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, I had a past affiliation with a school called Cristo Way Jesuit, and they look past all of that and definitively and continually point out the relationship between effort and achievement. And they indoctrinate into that to the children. And these people that are first generation, people that come from situations at home that, when I'm talking about it right now, affects the bumps on my arms, all of that, and they just say, well, that apply effort. The way out is through work, and it's working up there. Check it out, Cristo Rey Jesuit.
Thank you. Thank you.
How, if you don't speak the language?
What are you doing, or would you do, about the rising cost of higher education? What are you doing, or would you do, about the rising cost of higher education? Representative Lunan.
Well, I got a feeling it has a relationship to the amount of student aid we're giving. That's certainly when it escalated. And when you brought in all of a sudden this other bucket of money, and the universities or the places of education did what any business does and sees a business opportunity that increases it. I think the students that go into college have to be responsible about what situations they're going to go into relative to the debt they're going to come out of there with. You can't come out with $86,000 a year in student loans and then think you're going to go work as a waitress in an organic coffee shop and make that work. It's not going to. And this is all part of life. This is just putting your big boy pants on of going, okay, what's the upside and the downside for this? And it's hard. It's very, very hard. The big problem is, what are we going to do about the students that are in the situation right now? But going forward, that should be part of the counseling effort. It's going, okay, you're deciding you want to go to this school or you want to go into this, and you're saying that this is the vocation you want to go into. It's just not a fit.
Ms. Hernandez, what are you doing or will you do about the rising cost of higher education?
I feel our legislature failed to freeze the cost of colleges. Not everybody has been taught or trained, regardless of the generation. Our students are deciding to not graduate and go into work. They haven't even, like I said, we can't even get them to Normandale or Hennepin Tech. I disagree. I believe that in order to produce customers, to produce responsible citizens, we need to invest in their education, at least with a 2-year college.
Representative Lunan.
Well, the legislature, prior to my time, actually took care of that already. It's called post-secondary education option, where it's a tremendous opportunity for students to not only go to college for free, and there's your 2-year college right there. It's already there. And now they're actually bringing the professors into the high school, so you don't even have to get in a car or own a car. That's not a problem either. So the option's already there. What's between where that student is and where that student can be, though, is effort. It still goes back to effort. You still got to do the work.
Ms. Hernandez.
Again, we go back to cars. There's no transportation to get our kids to college. I've worked hand in hand with the students. It's a struggle. Not everybody qualifies. Not everybody in the city of Shakopee qualifies for this assistance, for this college aid.
Let's pivot now, candidates, to the environment. Is climate change real? Is it caused by human activity? And if so, what do we as a state need to do about it? Ms. Hernandez, we'll begin with you.
Definitely real and definitely caused by us. Even with the products that we use to face wash, that has that plastic thingies that are not biodegradable. Excuse my English today. Yes, it is caused by humans, and we need to take responsibility.
Representative Lunan, is climate change real? Is it caused by human activity? And what do we need to do about it?
Well, the climate's never not changed. Well, that's not a new anomaly. We've had that. We've had the ice age. It's always been changing. So yes, it's real. Does man have a factor in it? Can man do things different? Yep. What happens is the renewable energy. Everyone wants renewable energy. I want renewable. Everybody wants it. The problem I have right now is with government subsidies coming in and picking winners. So when you look at a renewable energy mandate, what they count is they count wind and they count in solar. They do not count hydroelectricity, not considered renewable. Why? Well, because once you build the dam, it's darn near free. Or once you build the darn dam, it's dam free, okay? However you want to word that. And there's no money in it. And so from a politics standpoint, you've got no traction to do any of that. So the argument's a little disingenuous. But renewable energy, I love the carbon capture they're looking at in the coal industry that actually would be carbon negative, if that's the priority.
Well, continuing on the topic of energy, how should we provide for the energy needs of Minnesota businesses and residents? And Representative Lunan, we'll continue with you.
Thank you. I sit on the Energy Committee, and very exciting. So some of the things going on out there. The near future of energy is going to have to do with storage. And it's not necessarily a chemical battery. It may be a mechanical battery. You may have a wind farm on the side of a hill by a lake, and when that wind farm's producing more electricity than can be used, that electricity or energy is used to pump water up to a reservoir up on the hill. When the wind's not blowing, you run the reservoir down a tube with turbines in it, and you create alternative energy. I suffer the government subsidies that come in that I think prevent bringing the market in that gets the cost down. You know, when microwaves were first invented, they were almost $2,000. They wanted to sell more. And all they had was the market. And so they had to make them cheaper, and they had to make them better. And they did, And they did, and that's what the market does. And let the market get the cost of this renewable energy down so it is more viable for everybody, rather than coming in and forcing and picking winners. That is blatant up at St. Paul.
Ms. Hernandez, how should we provide for the energy needs of Minnesota businesses and residents?
Well, I'm really proud. I have attended a couple of the 2030 meetings. I'm happy to see the solar panels coming up. I'm happy to see that our Shakopee public utilities are moving with the windmills. I'm excited. That's really where we need to go. It's clean energy.
Representative Lunan, 30 seconds.
Solar
to
energy
rebut.
is intermittent. It isn't always sunny. And solar energy, how it works, it's got a silicon crystal in it that when photon or sun energy hits it, it creates an electric current. It makes an electron jump. Solar panels are 12% efficient if it's natural crystal. The rest of that energy that gets pulled down to the solar panel becomes heat. Now, when you take a look at your climate change and your warmer everything, well, go over that with me. Explain that to me. Now they've got a synthetic crystal now that is more efficient. It gets it up to about 18%, but it literally never decomposes. It's a form of nuclear waste.
you.
Solar energy has its place, but it's got a lot more development it's got to do.
Oh, thank you, candidates. Did you want to rebut?
We got to start somewhere.
Well, our time is coming to a close. If people have not had an opportunity to ask questions or hear issues discussed that are important to them, I'm certain that they could approach you after the forum this evening, or check with your campaign, or visit your online presence to learn more about the stands that you each have. But now we're going to give our candidates 2 minutes to make closing statements. Ms. Hernandez, will begin with you.
Like I shared, I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about our healthcare. I'm passionate about transportation. I love Shakopee. Being an immigrant to this community, I have felt at home. Like I said, 3 of my children are born and raised in Shakopee. With Esperanza, I feel we have been moving forward. We have over 35 partners that from the city that I have found that care about our community, that care about our youth, that care about our building relationships. If you know Latinos, we're rooted in faith, we are rooted in family. I come today, and I thank you all for taking the time to get to know me. I ask for your support on November 8th to vote Mary Hernandez to bring a change that would unify the diversity that we have, the strength. Being a co-founder of the Shakopee Diversity Alliance, which we host the International Festival, it was amazing to see our city come together, being a bridge with the old and the new Shakopee, the historic Shakopee, and like Ms. Brecky mentioned, the ones that have built the city and the ones that are coming in. I want to continue to be able to do that. I want to continue to be a voice in our community. We're very involved. I love the kids. I love the parents. I see friends standing here today. I ask you to go to my website, maryforminnesota.com, and thank you very much. I look for your support on November 8th.
Representative Lunan.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mary, for running. It's a risk. And you're playing in a game, and you don't get to see the scoreboard till it's over. Then we pull down and see everybody did. And so there's a stress to that. Mary was one of the first people I sought out when I got elected, and because I do feel it's important that people feel like they're represented or have a voice. My phone calls all get answered. My emails all get responded to. My texts get responded to, too. And I don't have to look like someone to represent you. And if that was the case, then she can't represent me. You know, when I first saw her sign that had her picture on it, I thought, dang, I'm going to get a picture of my wife on mine. I'm certainly not going to use my picture. One of the things we didn't talk about tonight, though, was healthcare. Healthcare is going to be probably the darkest cloud on the horizon for all of us, and we've got to put down politics, both Republican and Democrat, and get that fixed. And what it's going to take is bringing the market in. There's nothing bringing down the cost of health care. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says you should take this pill or have this test taken. One, you not only don't ask, what does it cost? You don't even ask, do I really need it? And doing the work. The solution for the health care, and it's fixable. It's very fixable. But it's going to be worked by the consumers. Now, that's going to be a politically incorrect thing to say, but that's a fact. That's a fact that, you know, the high deductible situation people are in right now actually presents an opportunity. What I think the role MNsure can play, and I don't think you throw it all away. My God, we've spent so dang much. I think we've got $300 million on. I think we've got $22,000 per person we now have insured that wasn't insured just on that website before we ever bought them insurance. So we got to see if there's anything we can do with it at all. We can recycle some of it. And it may be that's a place where you can go and find out what that medication is going to cost, what that MRI is going to cost, and shop it and bring the price market back in to get the cost down, to get the burden off these poor families.
Time. Well, the views expressed in tonight's debate, of course, are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber and Visitors Bureau is sponsoring this event tonight as a service to the community and has gone to great lengths to ensure the objectivity of this forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. Thanks to you in the audience this evening. We thank our host, River Valley Church. We thank Shakopee Kids Voting. And on behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, we thank you, our candidates, as well. We appreciate your time, your candor, and the way that you're serving our community by running for office. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a brief intermission as we prepare for our Senate candidates. Thank you, and good night.